Engela has written the first chapter of what may turn out to eventually be a novel or a novella under the mentorship of writer, poet and editor Karin Schimke. This is a fantasy story that can easily find its place in bookstores next to The Hunger Games or The Maze Runner. I'm going to read the story as we scroll Engela's words across the screen. You can join me in one of the following ways. Listen to the story as I read it, or mute your sound and read it in your own internal reader's voice. So, get a cup of coffee, settle down in your favorite chair. Here we go. The Pebble Tower by Engela Whittle. Chapter 1. Carter jumped awake to a drilling buzz erupting from his phone. On instinct, he grabbed it from his bedside table, rubbing the strain from his eyes and gulping down a yawn. He chuckled, smiling from ear to ear. Birthday messages for his 19th, which was today. He counted them, 30 in total. The last was from Travis, a guy he barely knew who'd been in physics class with him last year. "Hey man, hope your birthday is as much of a blast as our last chem project." That last chem project had been crazy. Carter remembered the priceless look of total panic on Travis's face, the moment when those fire alarms started blaring. "Looks like we've created a hydrogen bomb here, Einstein," Carter had joked. "How honored am I, my good sir? Here is your Nobel Prize." He handed a crumpled sphere of tinfoil over to a now smirking Travis, who reached out, shaking his head, accepting the prize gratefully. "Why, thank you. The honor's all mine." Travis had played along. The boys stood forgetting about their situation for a second, laughing amidst the chaos. "Boys!" It was Mr. Russell. You could swear to see the steam rising from that shiny tomato. "Outside! Now!" Carter slid out of bed. He stood for a moment, phone still tightly in hand, basking in the warm sigh of summer seeping through the slits of his blinds. Today was going to be good. He turned around to face his disheveled bed. Guess it was time for the morning to get going. He opened WhatsApp and clicked on his chat with Dylan. Of course it was Dylan, of all people, who would be up at 12 a.m. to send Carter a 3-minute-long voice note filled with nonsense. He set the phone down and pressed play before returning to straighten up the covers of his bed. A wildly out-of-tune and prolonged "Happy Birthday" song of Dylan's own creation wailed out. The title was Carter's Birthday Remix. It sent Carter dying on the floor with laughter. But Carter knew Dylan all too well not to leave him with just that. A message underneath read, "Happy birthday to my best bro Carter. Dang, can't believe you're already 19. How's it? Any different? Feels like it was just yesterday when I sat next to the scrawny kid at grade 8 orientation. How's it out there in Fiddlesburg anyway? Must be scorching. One thing's for sure, I don't miss that or that eye-straining Pebble Tower. We were practically obsessed with that thing as kids." Carter stopped for a moment, sitting down to read the message properly. He couldn't multitask for this one. It stood in his mind. The golden sun shining down on a field of white daisies flourishing at the base of Property 42, just before piles of smooth little pebbles began to accumulate, mounting up in wobbly pillars. The pebbles, ash grey, some tinging with fiery streaks, or maybe, from a different angle, they grew pale and a bit dull. You could never know how they alter, or maybe you could, if you followed their climb to the heavens. He missed his friend. "Anyway, how's it the gang? Bro, it feels so far away here in mainstream city. Wish I could spend the day with you guys, man." The message continued. Dylan was practically the first one of his friends to rush out of town as soon as school ended. Both he and Carter had been accepted into mainstream university and were planning to share an apartment. "I'm so glad to be out of this dump. See you at uni," Dylan had said, grinning widely, just before he left in December. But Carter felt that his fleeting time before university would be best spent in his hometown. Besides, he still had Tyler and Emily to hang out with. "I hope your birthday goes well, man. Try to relax. Oh, and give Emily a big hug for me." Carter smiled at that last line. Dylan always knew how to lighten the mood. He was the type of guy to end you off on a high. Carter set the phone down and continued to get ready for breakfast, only to snatch it up shortly afterwards again. Although completely engrossed, he attempted to multitask. It wasn't the anticipation of birthday messages that pulled him back to his phone, but something else. Something that a plagued local would only know too well. The neighborhood of Fiddlesburg Lane carried on as it usually would. Lawnmowers buzzed over front yards, while neighbors exchanged friendly greetings. It was summer holiday, so the children spent most of their time indoors, glued to their cell phones and tablets, lurking within the dark of their rooms. Most of them were either scrolling through posts, following influencers, commenting or chatting to one another, all with regards to the latest updates of the Case 42 reporters. One thing's for sure. Every child and young adult living in Fiddlesburg Lane was entirely invested in Case 42. The Pebble Tower Challenge. Carter didn't hear the knock on his door. The door clicked open, and his dad stepped through the crack, trailed by his mom. Carter was brushing his hair out in the mirror, still oblivious to the fact that someone had just entered his room. Faintly, he heard the shuffle of feet and noticed his dad. Carter's dad, upon entering the room, scrunched up a face, further igniting the canyon grounds of his skin, which Carter gazed upon perturbingly. "Here we go again." "Ray," said a small but stern voice. "Not today, it's his birthday." Carter watched his parents. Raymond Johnson swerved around to face a very serious-looking Linda. This was a rare sight to see in her. Immediately he straightened up, plastering on a smile. He knew that tone, and that tone meant business. Linda gave a gleeful smile, holding up a carefully wrapped box to Raymond's face. To this, he held up his hands and the box slapped down into them. She stared him down. "Oh, hey, Dad," Carter greeted from the mirror, phone in hand. Raymond and Linda immediately sprang into life singing, "Happy Birthday," Linda clapping her hands awkwardly as Raymond walked over to hand Carter his gift. Carter looked down at his phone. There was a new notification, but he had to let it wait. His parents were giving him a celebration. He accepted the gift gratefully. He looked at a smiling Linda leaning in the doorway. "Thank you, Mom," and then obscurely at Raymond, who stood towering in front of him. "And you too, Dad." Carter braced himself for a sweaty bear hug, twisting his arms back and shoving his phone down his pocket. He forced a smile and scrunched up his eyebrows. His dad bent down to level his son and looked him in the eye. There was a slight hint of uneasiness that Carter couldn't quite put his finger on. Raymond placed a firm hand on his son's shoulder. "Happy birthday, son. I hope you can appreciate this gift. Know that your mom and I love you very much." He tried to speak as lovingly as he could muster. No hug. Carter was surprised. He straightened up. "Thanks, Mom and Dad." He looked at Linda. "I love you," and smiled back at Raymond. Why hadn't his dad given him a hug? Was he angry with him? No wonder, the guy's always angry at something. Carter looked back down at the gift and proceeded to tear open the wrapping. A pang of disbelief hit. The box displayed an image of a happy family camping in the outdoors. Wow, thanks, Mom and Dad," he exclaimed in enthusiastic sarcasm. He got up and walked to the door in disappointment, not saying a word. "And what was that supposed to mean?" Raymond echoed from behind. Carter could hear his dad's frustration. He gave his mom a hug as she kissed him on the forehead, afterwards continuing to walk outside. In this moment, he knew that the smart decision was to take some time to cool down. One thing that definitely wasn't ideal was to face an angry Raymond. Then it hit him, a tang of guilt for leaving his parents behind in the house, and fear of what might happen if he returned. He couldn't face them now. Besides, he needed to start getting out more often so that he could be ready for his final mission. He was too disappointed in his dad for the most. There was no doubt that his dad picked out such a gift. A camping tent. Does it look like he spends his free time prancing around merrily in the open wilderness? It was just another hobby that he tried to force him into. Carter opened his phone to read the notification. "Another daring influencer faces the Case 42 climb," the title read. Now, Carter's attention was fully fixed. Local influencer Dasher2000 of Fiddlesburg Lane claims to know the secret of Case 42 and wants to share it with his followers. Today, Dasher stands at the forefront of Property 42, carrying a backpack of survival tools while strapped to a sturdy set of rock climbing gear. Dasher was just about to break the stereotypical unprepared influencer trend until he swiped left on a pair of climbing boots to show off his latest Crocs merch instead. Carter jolted up, seeing a swoosh of silver pass along the road in front of him. It was just another news van. He saw them practically every day. The reporters were always quick on their feet to catch an influencer's ascent. On instinct, his parents came rushing out of the house straight into their car. They drove away following the path of the news van and not once looking in Carter's direction. At least Carter had the house to himself now. He held up his phone, walked through the yard, past the corridor, disappearing into the dark of his house where he spent the morning until lunch scrolling through articles and posts, watching videos and working on his digital sketches. It was a quiet morning, different to his routinely group video calling and online gaming sessions, but he enjoyed it. It felt good to just be at home. In Fiddlesburg Lane, yes, there was an almost daily occurrence of the golden sun, field of daisies and buzz of lawnmowers. But one occurrence is so usual that it simply goes unmentioned. The mob of reporters hovering about Property 42. To an outsider, this would be considered a sour sight to come across, or an even nastier repugnance to live near. Nonetheless, this was the way of the people of Fiddlesburg Lane, and strangely, above all else, they seemed to thrive off the attention. People would purposely be out in their yards doing garden work, or taking a leisurely stroll along the streets to supposedly buy some bread from the local corner shop, just to get a glimpse of a flashing camera. They were all freaks for the show of it, except, of course, the children. A child of Fiddlesburg Lane was a vampire. They thrived in the shadows. Their skin was so ghostly pale and delicate that it would sustain cuts from any random lightweight object, such as a sliver of paper or the point of a feather. Some would suck the blood from these cuts. Their eyes were constantly heavy, engraving dark circles, bagging beneath the perimeter of their eyelids, and their muscles were stunted, concerningly soft, until a select few would begin training to become influencers. The children of Fiddlesburg Lane were becoming dangerous, and Carter wasn't far from the picture. It was lunchtime and Carter's parents still hadn't returned. His phone began to buzz. It was Tyler, Carter's childhood best friend. Carter plopped down onto the couch and answered the call. "No ways, if it isn't tie-dye," started Carter before being cut off by another happy birthday song. Only this one was sung better and had normal lyrics. "Oh, thanks, bro. Look at you being a sweetie," Carter teased. "Shut up," Tyler replied fiercely, clearly annoyed by Carter's comment. He waited for Carter to finish laughing. "What you up to today?" Tyler intervened. Nothing much. Just wanted to chill and enjoy my last birthday in town," Carter replied. He paused for a moment, staring at the protruding tower in the distance outside his window. "Yeah, I would have done the same. Not many people left here, are there?" Tyler continued. "Yep." Carter got up from the couch and started walking towards the window. "It's just you, me, and Emily now. Speaking of Em, how is she? Have you heard from her today yet?" Tyler asked. "No, but I'm sure she'll text me sooner or later. You know her." Carter spoke but was still distracted by the tower. He wasn't just going to stand there any longer. "Anyway, how's your day been looking?" He walked to the kitchen and started packing out ingredients for a chicken mayo sandwich. "Also nothing much happening. I did sleep in late, though. That's why you're only hearing from me now," Tyler replied. "Man, that's so different from my morning," Carter snorted, smearing butter on 2 slices of bread. "Oh, yeah? You probably got lots of birthday wishes, presents, and a big breakfast," Tyler insisted eagerly. "Ha! That sounds about right." Carter wondered whether he should mention the gift and the frustrations he had with his dad, but thought otherwise when Tyler continued talking. I'm probably going to go online in a few. GTA's getting a new update. Gonna see if I can figure out the new cheat codes. Maybe steal some ideas for this new game code I'm working on. Tyler had been accepted into New Tech University to study app and game development. He spent most of his time either gaming or coding, and just by looking at his thousands of demo games alone, you could see it paid off. Want to join me? No, I'm going to have some lunch now and then maybe I'll join later. Carter had finished making the sandwich and was now busy toasting it. He threw some fruit, along with a picnic blanket and his iPad, into a backpack. You better not be heading to that tower right now, Tyler said firmly. Nah. Carter looked down frantically at his iPad and pen sitting in the backpack. Just finishing some drawings I was busy with. Yeah, you're going to the tower, Tyler sighed. It's not like I can stop you, though. Carter breathed out a sigh of relief. I have to do this. I know. Just look after yourself, man. Tyler, who knew his friend all too well, replied. The call ended. Carter wrapped the toasted sandwich in tinfoil and tucked it into his backpack. He plucked a ring of keys from the rack, swung the backpack around his arm, and left out through the front door, locking it shut. Carter made it from his house to the street, stopping for only a moment to turn around. He lifted his hand up to block the sun and saw his house. For the first time, he felt fear. Fear of leaving it all behind for the Pebble Tower. Then he squinted, and off to the right-hand side was the Pebble Tower, basking in the glory of all its ominousness. Carter knew what he had to do. He'd known for the longest time. Carter Johnson was a typical kid of Fiddlesburg Lane. He grew up in a world teeming with smartphones that were constantly ridiculed by his DIY enthusiast parents. The only portion of time his parents would receive his full attention and devotion was during Carter's baby years. From there on, the smartphones and tablets had slowly crept up, invading the boy's psyche and infecting him like a virus. You see, it wasn't Carter's fault that he became an iPad kid. It was just the ritual of his generation. He was bound to get there at some point, although before this, he was a very sweet kid. When he was younger, he used to run around playing with his toys in magical made-up worlds like any typical toddler would do. He would occasionally scrape his knee or knock a bruise on his elbow, triggering the all-famous toddler scream cry as his parents rushed to console him. In these moments, his parents were his world, and he was theirs. Of course, now they regret not cherishing these moments more fondly. Carter even used to play outside at those times. Well, he did have some boundaries. He wasn't allowed past the front yard. This was also sprinkled into their stew of regret, not watching Carter more carefully. One day, the wind had carried his soccer ball down the street, so he chased it. That was the end of Carter's belief in the long, smoking chimney built a few houses away. He stood and watched his ball resting in a pile of pebbles. His parents were furious, swatting away any apologies or questions he threw at them. Now that he knew that seeing or even asking about the Pebble Tower was forbidden, it only fueled his curiosity. The Pebble Tower grew to become the main thought in his mind, leading him to notice any little clue around the house, on the news, and on his iPad that gave him insight to his questions. And just like that, there went Carter, down the wormhole of media, stuck in succession of video after video, all revolving around Case 42, the Pebble Tower. It was the hook that most kids bit in Fiddlesburg Lane. Well, all at their own time, of course. Carter continued down the street, counting backwards from his house, number 216, turning the corner at house 100, before continuing until he reached the infamous Property 42. There was a row of vans parked at the base of the property. Some squashed the delicate daisies beneath them. People dressed in formal wear and holding mics stood sporadically in the field, tracing the perimeter of the tower, while people fully clothed in grey bent at all angles to film them with large protrusions of cameras. As Carter neared, he noticed that a few of the vans began to leave. It was probably because Dasher 2000 was no longer visible from the base of the tower. He continued between the commotion, through the daisies that seemed to ogle him as he walked past. An array of gravelly brimstone pebbles lay scattered across the field. The bud of a wild cherry rose peeked from behind the bumper of a van. She beckoned Carter back to his place between quiet bushes of wild roses, rosemary, and lavender. Back to where he secretly sat through the previous year and drew elaborate sketches of the Pebble Tower. These sketches would later serve as a successful application to study digital design at Mainstream University. Carter placed down his backpack and unzipped the front pouch. He took out the picnic blanket and unfolded it onto the outgrowth of grass along the base of the flower bushes. The sandwich and iPad were next. He placed them side by side and then sat down cross-legged, leaning his head into the palm of his hand and looking up to the tower. Each pebble was an eyeball ensembled in a giant physical entity staring down at him. Streaks of orange oxidation burnt into their transformed ashen surface. The tower was a sickly structure that struggled to hold herself upright, wobbling perpetually and dropping pebbles that left gaping holes in its crumbling pillar. As the wind flew through the gaps, she whistled the sweet, solemn tune of a fiddle. Although it was precarious to climb the tower, many souls like Dasher 2000 grew so captivated by her glory that they couldn't resist the urge to climb, following the trail of secrets she led up to the heavens. No one had ever fallen from her heights, and even she refused to fall herself. No one had ever returned home from the venture to her heart. Carter picked up his pen and began to sketch. He drew the tower arching over silver vans and reporters with mics in hand. He drew pebbles raining from above and thudding into the field of daisies. He drew a crowd of people rushing with steel umbrellas to a rather large fallen pebble. That didn't seem right. He lay down and peeked between the legs of onlookers to get a glimpse of what all the commotion was about. An ugly neon green croc burned into view through the daisies who seemed to turn their backs at the sight. Carter began to lift himself up, eyes fixed on the croc. It must have been Dasher's. He was just about to step through the bushes when his phone buzzed. It was a notification from WhatsApp, a message from Emily. Carter shifted backwards and sat back down on the blanket, eyes now fixed on his phone. He opened the message. Happy birthday to my best friend Carter. Thank you for being the loyal, sweet, and supportive person that you are. You always know how to bring me out of my comfort zone with your outgoing and light-hearted personality. I appreciate that. Remember that time when you convinced me to come to Athletics Day? I thought I would have exploded from all the screaming and shouting, but you taught me the songs and made it fun when we went to join Tyler and Dylan in the crowd. Carter laughed with a silly smile and started leaning on his palm again. He couldn't get enough of her words. And thanks for the quiet times you spent with me. Tyler says you were the one who dragged him along to come and sit next to me when I moved from online to the actual school building in grade 9. Huh? Usually Dylan was the one to sound dramatic, not Tyler. Carter pushed the thought aside and continued reading. Anyway, I hope you have a wonderful birthday and that today you feel special. Lots of love, Emily. After that, Carter could say that he already felt special. When he spoke to Emily, the whole world became a blur. It was just her, as clear as day, who kept his gaze and heard his story. He wished he could see her more often, but knew that she preferred to spend her time in solitude. It was a peaceful place for her. During those rare moments when she did join their online game lobby or phone him out of the blue, he struggled to contain the rush of excitement that spiked through his heart and flew over his head. In truth, he felt relief. Relief that she had not grown too comfortable in her isolation bubble. He feared for her and cared about her, deeply, intensely, now more than ever that he would leave her here for university in just a few fleeting days. Emily was taking a gap year to focus on her oil painting. Carter had never seen anyone else spend as much time away from their phone as she did. He wished that she would have at least applied to study fine art at Mainstream, but she had made up her mind. It was a shame that her extraordinary talent remained hidden. He'd only ever seen her artwork once, lying out to dry in the school art room. But the painting had lived in his mind ever since. It was of a young boy and a girl, both with the same dark wavy hair as Emily, looking about 10 and 5 years of age. He was holding a torch to a wall in his left hand, and the girl's hand in the other. They smiled and laughed joyously as vibrant shadow puppets danced across his stage of light. But to the left of the boy, the happy little shadows began to distort, until seemingly disintegrating and floating up, forming a stream into the sky. The stream. It looked familiar. On that day, Carter had been peering through the window, eyes lost in admiration. He watched until he saw her walk past to gather her things from a nearby desk. Startled, Carter turned around, back to the wall built on from the left side of the window. He closed his eyes, covered his face with his hands, hiding the blooming red on his cheeks. "Keep your cool, Carter," he'd muttered to himself. The door creaked open and Emily walked through. "Oh, hey, Carter, you scared me there," she remarked, turning to face Carter. Carter straightened up. "Hey, Em, your painting, wow." He settled his hand on her shoulder. "It's beautiful." Emily jumped, lifting her hand to her mouth, to which Carter dropped his hand from her shoulder. Her eyes were wide, and her fine eyebrows pulled into a scrunch. Now she was blushing too. "Thank you, Carter. It's nothing much." "No, really, Em, you have a real talent," Carter insisted. "Okay." She dropped her hand. There was a moment where they locked eyes. Carter smiled sweetly at Emily. He could tell she was afraid. Maybe the moment was too raw for her. She forced a slight smile and nodded in assurance that she would be okay. Carter nodded back. Emily turned around and walked down the hallway, leaving Carter to go to his next lesson. Carter had to stop daydreaming now. He checked the time in his phone. It was already 3 p.m. Time really flies fast when you're in your own mind. He got up, gathered his things, and began to walk, but something stopped him when he reached the street. The path forked in front of him. He looked up. Down to the right was his house, and up to the left was Emily's house. He had never visited her before. Letting out a breath, he turned to the left. Out of everyone, she deserved to know his plan for tomorrow. Carter counted down new numbers from 42, 36, 28, 20, until he reached it. House number 10. He stopped and stood, smiling before the gate of the wooden picket fence surrounding the property. On the other side, weeds sprouted through the cracks of a weathered stone path, leading to a splintered umber door. A bed of bright red poppies burst, untamed along the foot of the honey-coloured wall leading up to a spectacular window. Even her house was a work of art. Carter sucked in a breath and reached down to unlock the little gate. It creaked open as he lifted his foot onto the stone. Finally, after all this time, he was eagerly standing in front of Emily's door, about to see her for the first time out of school. Carter was in the midst of lifting his fist to knock when the slight movement of a curtain in the window caught him out of the corner of his eye. His smile broadened. On the other side of the window was a portrait of the girl with the slick, dark, wavy hair. Emily. Her face bloomed to life as she gasped in astonishment of her visitor. Carter turned his hand to wave, but before he could, the curtain whisked around, and she was gone. The doorknob was turning. "Carter!" a wide-eyed Emily exclaimed. She lowered into a sort of whisper. "What are you doing here?" Emily was wearing an oversized white T-shirt with a sketch of a woodland landscape printed on the front, black sneakers, and a pair of wanting-to-be baggy jeans dappled in the random paint streak. She was a true artist. "I wanted to see you." Carter gazed deep into her dark eyes. He was going to miss her terribly. "Really now?" Emily chuckled. Actually," Carter cleared his throat. That was rather rude of me, milady. Playing the fool was always a good tactic to mask his feelings. He straightened up. Hey, Em, how's your day going? He attempted to start again. Well, it's going all right, I guess, Emily answered, looking off to the side, her smile fading a bit. She caught herself and looked back at Carter. Hey, don't direct the attention on me. It's your birthday. I'm the one who should be asking you about your day. For the most part, it was fun. Thanks for asking, he replied, leaning against the door frame. A photo frame came into view hanging on the far wall behind Emily. Carter recognized the photo immediately. It was of the shadow puppet boy, only he was a bit older, looking about 14 now. Emily, who's that? Is someone here? A voice boomed from the distance. You know we're not supposed to have visitors. Emily jumped into a panic. Don't worry, Mum. I'm just on a phone call with my friend, she shouted back. You better be, Emily's mum sternly answered. We can't afford to let anyone else know about Marcus. Marcus? Who was Marcus? Carter was baffled. Carter, you have to go. Emily's eyebrows creased. She suddenly became frantic. You can't be here. She began pushing him out towards the little picket fence gate. Carter couldn't just leave like this. Em, wait! He pushed his arms out onto her shoulders. She stopped and looked up at him. There's actually something I came here to show you. Really? Emily noticed the seriousness in Carter's expression and looked concerningly into his eyes. Okay, how long will this take? Not that long, 45 minutes max, Carter elaborated. You know the Pebble Tower? Oh, no, Carter, you know I don't like that place. Emily cut him off. I know, Em, but I really need you for this one. He tried to give her a smile. Besides, you've never actually been there, have you? Emily looked down at the grass. No, I suppose not. Em. They locked eyes. I promise you it's not as bad as your mind has made it out to be. Emily sighed, shaking her head. She started biting her nails. I can't believe I'm doing this, she mumbled through her teeth. Carter could have hugged her right then and there, but he was too afraid to scare her away. He smiled, a real one. Thanks, Em. Yeah, don't get too comfortable yet. My mom can't know where I'm going, so we have to figure something out. Emily turned around, looking back at the open front door and forcing Carter to drop his arms. When do you usually leave the house? Carter caught her attention again. That's the problem. I don't usually leave the house except for school and emergency shopping runs, Emily explained. Carter balanced his chin with his hand. Are you missing any supplies around the house? Emily thought for a moment. No, none that I can think of right now. Emily, where are you? The voice from inside boomed. Emily jumped. I'm here, just taking something out to the bin. Take a loaf of bread, Carter mumbled. He stretched out to Emily. Em, go to the kitchen and fetch a loaf of bread. Tell your mom that you're going to the shop to buy bread. I will hide the loaf in my backpack until we get back. Then you can show it to her. But, Emily sighed, still biting her nails. She closed her eyes. This better work. Then she bolted into the house. Carter couldn't believe his luck. He had actually managed to convince Emily to leave her house. After looking around the doorway, he finally let his excitement win, doing a little celebration. Well, Emily appeared at the doorway, snapping Carter back into their predicament. She walked forward along the path, meeting him at the gate. I did it. Her smile twitched slightly as she handed the loaf of bread to him. Quickly, walk through the gate before I change my mind. Carter didn't hesitate to slide open the lock, pulling the gate forward. They slipped through and began to walk briskly, side by side along the street. Carter was still cradling the loaf of bread in his arms as he turned to look at Emily. He smiled, watching her hair bounce as she fiercely treaded on the tar, determined to be out of view from the house. Thanks for coming with me, Em, Carter took a moment to voice. Of course, Carter. She turned to face him, smiling softly. You're my friend. I'm always here if you need me. Carter moved his gaze forward, trying to hide his concern. Yeah. The tower. He stared at it growing nearer with every step. Happy birthday, Carter. Emily's voice brushed the air beside him.